Sup, guys? Toad back with you again. 0-2 yesterday. I'm on an 0-4 run to start the week. Not happy about this at all. Obviously, I'm pissed. I'm back right at like the break-even point again on the year. This just does not get better. It does not improve. I thought with the NBA starting, it was going to be better. We don't even talk about that hockey game last night because that was just ridiculous. Omar against, I think it was Hoffer in there, but Bennington was in that game as well. St. Louis, both goaltenders completely sucked ass. What can you even do about it? NBA game, I kind of think I should have won. Both NBA games, I kind of think I should have won. Like, the games were looking pretty decent in the first half in both of those games. I mean, really more than decent with the Orlando one the other night. And last night, Minnesota looked good in the first half, too. Then they wound up losing the game. And why was that the case? Yeah, Minnesota had 20 turnovers in the game, and that was the difference in the game. Otherwise, statistically, they kind of outplayed Dallas in the game otherwise. It's not that often you get a home team have double the amount of turnovers as their road opponent. That does not happen that much in the NBA. Ridiculous. Jay Foot, what's up, man? Do you have a foot fetish or something? Foot guys are weird, man. Let's move on to today. I'm going to have two plays in the NBA today, and that is what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at either or any of the other sports. I'll talk about World Series quickly because this series continues. The slump continues. The series continues with the Yankees winning 11-4 last night, but the game was definitely closer than that final score looked at the very least. I mentioned the bullpens are just really used up right now and taxed, and that is going to be the case coming into this game too, as they're playing a third day in a row here, obviously. So you could potentially maybe look towards an over in this one if you wanted to, just like I said last night, although the starting pitching matchup isn't as over-conducive as last night's was, and this total is actually dropping from 8.5 juice to the under to 8 juice to the over, 82% of tickets and only 60% of the cash there, but this is Yankee Stadium, two good offensive lineups and bullpens that are overworked right now, so I would not trust this game to stay under once the relief staffs come into this game. With the starting pitching matchup, it looks like, yeah, maybe, because these are the two aces on the mound for these two teams here, but even so, I still think that there are reasons why even the starting pitchers might be vulnerable in this game as well. Which I'll talk about in a minute. Yankees are up from -135 to -139, 62% of the tickets, 88% of the cash, as they are trying to reverse being the only team to have blown a 3-0 series lead in baseball history, as they are trying to be on the other side of that this year. And obviously, for my sake, I hope that does not wind up being the case. This is Jack Flaherty against Garrett Cole here. Based on the indicators in the market, it looks like the odds are the market is indicating on the Yankees and the under. I would actually lean to the Yankees and the over in this one, like I said, but there's no way I'm going to play either of these. I did play on the Yankees in the starting pitching matchup in game one because not only did I think Cole did he have the matchup advantage, which that game wound up coming down to the bullpens anyway, so I wasn't necessarily wrong about the starting pitching matchup there. Cole had the better numbers against the Dodgers than Flaherty does against the Yankees. That is still the case. He still does. But Cole actually has better road numbers and Flaherty has better home numbers. So this shift in venue makes me not want to play on the Yankees side of this same matchup, even though I did in game one. That has been my only play in the World Series, and that will continue to be the case because I'm not going to play on this one. But if I were going to, probably the Yankees would be the strongest way to look at this, just because it is still that same pitching matchup again. Jack Flaherty for the Dodgers, good season, 3.17 ERA, 1.07 WHIP between the Detroit Tigers and the Dodgers. He was on both of those teams this season. He's now made 4 starts in the playoffs, and he hasn't done that well, mostly because he had one really bad start against the Mets where he gave up 8 earned runs, skyrocketing his ERA in the playoffs to 6.1, 14-8 strikeout walk ratio. Doesn't look very good either, though. But in his one game in game one of this series, his team won, and he went 5 1/3 and gave up 2 earned runs, 6.1 strikeout walk ratio. So he did not do nearly as bad as I thought that he would in that first game. he did all right. But his numbers against the Yankees are still bad. In 75 at bats. Now this includes that other playout. This includes that start in the World Series this season. 20-13 strikeout walk ratio. That's not good. He's given up 4 home runs, although 3 of them are Rizzo. So Rizzo specifically does hit him really well. Other than that, actually, the Yankees don't do quite as well, but still, as a team, they hit him to the tune of 293 for a batting average and an 891 OPS. Those numbers went down a little bit in that prior start, but his numbers are still not good against the Yankees. His splits, though, as I mentioned, he is actually better on the road than at home this season. That has been the case. Although at home, I think that includes when he was at Detroit. He had a 3.44 home ERA, which is still not bad, but a 2.94 ERA on the road. So he is a bit better on the road than at home. I haven't looked up what his specific stats are at Yankee Stadium because I decided to not play this game, so I didn't dive in deeper than that. Garrett Cole pitching for the Yankees, 3.41 ERA, 1.13 whip on the season. He also had a good season. He has also made 4 starts in the playoffs now, and he's been way better than Jack Flaherty in the playoffs with a 2.82 ERA, 16-6 strikeout walk ratio, and 1 earned run allowed in that start against the Dodgers in this series. Went 6 innings, 4.0 strikeout walk ratio, and only allowed 4 hits. So he did still outpitch Jack Flaherty, but the bullpens wound up being the deciding factor in that game. So I lost my play on that one late in the game. But Cole does have the better numbers against the Dodgers still than Flaherty does against the Yankees. Flaherty's numbers against the Yankees, not good. Cole has 148 at-bats against the Dodgers, quite a few. 39-12 strikeout walk ratio actually isn't that great. Not the greatest ratio, but still better than Flaherty's. And he's held him to a 257 batting average. It's actually gone up somehow because I think it was 220-something going into the prior game. So I don't know how it's gone up that high in that one start, which wasn't even bad. I don't know how. Maybe I got those numbers wrong in the previous game. Either way, 257 batting average against is not that bad. 745 OPS is not horrible either. I mean, it's good enough. So I do think Cole does have the advantage in this pitching matchup as well. Oh, and I forgot to mention his splits, though, which Cole's splits are kind of the main reason why I'm not jumping in on the Yankees here, because in his season, his home ERA has been significantly worse. So the Yankee Stadium is a more hitter-friendly park. 4.31 ERA at home, 2.49 on the road. So he has been worse at home. So no play on that, but that's just the way that I look at that game. Moving over to NHL, a few interesting games here. I'm not going to play any of these, but my initial read on Islanders and Blue Jackets here was to lean to the Islanders side, but the market looks very much against it, dropping them from minus 155 to minus 146. 73% of the tickets on the Islanders is the road favorite, but 57% of the cash coming in on Columbus. I don't really see the reasoning behind the move on that other than the fact that the Islanders did play last night. So the Islanders are in a back-to-back, but that's really the only bad thing that you could say about the spot for the Islanders, in my opinion. They're not traveling, and they had a couple days off before yesterday. Or no, they are traveling, but they're starting a road trip. So starting a road trip actually tends to be a focus spot as well. I think their slip-up yesterday against Anaheim, I just think they did not focus really against Anaheim, and they were coming off a big game against Florida, so I think that's kind of why they dropped that game yesterday to Anaheim. And it's going to be good for them when they lost a couple games at home. Even though it is a back-to-back, I think it's going to help them to just get out of there, go on the road, not focus on what the news media is saying about you. Just get out there, go on the road, focus on hockey. So I actually think this is a positive spot for the Islanders, even though they played last night. They had Sorokin in net last night, and they've been alternating basically half and half between Sorokin and Varlamov. Varlamov, I think it's Varlamov, right? But I don't know, man. I think I might prefer Varlamov in net for them. So I think he might actually be the better of their two goalies. I'm not even sure. I haven't looked at what their stats have been this year so far, but actually Varlamov's been bad this year. Sorokin has actually been better, so never mind. But for some reason, I just remember Varlamov being a decent goalie. That hasn't really been the case this year, so I don't know. But it is going to be Varlamov in net here because Sorokin played yesterday. So take from that what you will. But I think Columbus is actually not particularly in a good spot here because they're coming off beating the Edmonton Oilers 6-1. I mean, I don't think you get yourselves in much more of a letdown spot than that, man. When you beat the Western Conference champions from last year and you absolutely clobber them 6-1, and that was against with Columbus had their worst goalie in net there with Merzlikins. Tarasov is their better goalie, although neither of them are very good. It'll be Tarasov tonight, I assume, but I don't think that's going to help Columbus that much, to be honest. And they have Winnipeg up next, and Winnipeg has like the best record in the NHL. So to me, it doesn't look like a great spot for Columbus. I think maybe this is a little bit looking sandwichy here. So the market is completely indicating on the Columbus side, though. But there's no way I'm going to play Columbus in a spot like that. I'm just going to pass, obviously, on that one. And then we do see some market indicators kind of against Winnipeg, dropping from -170 to -140, even though the cash percentage has shifted from what it was earlier this morning. So it's now 52% on Winnipeg and 53% of the tickets on Detroit. I think maybe the cash has kind of shifted now that the line has dropped so much. When it was at Winnipeg -170, I think a lot of the cash came in on the Detroit side. And now that the Winnipeg line is way down, it looks like maybe some is coming back in on the Winnipeg side. I don't exactly know the reason for the huge move there, but Winnipeg finally lost a game. They were 8-0, and then they finally lost. So a lot of times when you lose that first game and you're just not used to it at all, that can tend to linger into the next game and hang you over a little bit, even though I know they're starting a new road trip here, so it's not necessarily an unfocused spot for Winnipeg there. But the fact that they just lost that first game and it's not a position they're used to being in this year could hang them over a little bit into this game against Detroit. Detroit, on the other hand, I mean, they're coming off a big game as well, though, where they went into overtime and lost to Edmonton. So that was a big game for them as well. They played Edmonton tough. They have an extra day off in here, though, so that extra day off might help maybe break this like losing momentum that they have here in those two games that they had. That was also kind of a tough spot where they had played a bunch of games in a row, and now they've had some rest. So Detroit a little bit more rested. So I could see leaning to the Detroit side in this one, but obviously, again, not something I'm going to do here. And then it looked like pretty strong market indicators against Colorado, down from -135 to -111. 86% of the tickets and only 64% of the cash on Colorado. So they look like a public favorite here where the line is just moving against them. And it's gotten down to the point where they don't even have home ice in this game now. The line has dropped so much. The line at this point is now indicating that Tampa is actually even the slightly better team here. I'm not sure I would quite go that far. I think maybe the line's gotten a little bit out of hand, but definitely strong market indicators going against Colorado. Colorado started off the season terribly, losing 4 games in a row. It's been a very streaky season for Colorado, and then they won 5 games in a row, though granted the best team that they beat in there was probably Seattle. I mean, I don't know. They started beating up on bad teams, although granted they did a bunch of it on the road, so not totally terrible. And then they finally lost again, so their win streak has been broken in their previous game as well. So just like with Winnipeg, when you lose that like win streak, that can tend to hang you over a little bit into the next game as well. Maybe that will be the case here. Colorado's staying at home with 1 day off. Tampa has won their last couple of games, and they also have 1 day off, and they're starting a road trip here with momentum. So it looks like a more positive spot for Tampa, because when you're winning, you have that winning momentum at home, and then you get to go out on the road. It tends to be a focus spot for you, and you tend to not only want to get that road trip off on the right foot, but it tends to help continue that momentum. The starting a road trip just tends to be a positive spot in general. So the lean would be to the Tampa side in that one. Possibly that's the strongest lean on the hockey card, to the Tampa side, but I am not getting involved in hockey. I am getting involved in the NBA in 2 games here. And one game that just kind of caught my eye, but I'll just talk about it just because it's so bizarre. Raptors Hornets. Are we really in a situation now where the Toronto Raptors are so bad that the Charlotte Hornets are laying 6.5 against them? Even though I know it's at home, but still, that is crazy. The Charlotte Hornets, one of the lesser teams in the NBA, laying a price like that against any other team is just wild to me. I mean, the Toronto Raptors, that line makes it look like Toronto might actually be considered by odds makers to be the worst team in basketball, which is crazy. I know they're not good, but man, that's wild. Hornets up from 5.5 to 6.5, 88% of the tickets and only 71% of the cash. So my first look at this, looking at the schedule, I was thinking this is probably going to be closer to like a pick'em line or maybe Charlotte a very small favorite. And man, I was surprised by that line. So that line, it looks so weird to see Charlotte laying that many points. It almost looks like you actually kind of want to come in and play Charlotte because the line looks so suspect. Like, how is a bad Charlotte team laying a price like this? I don't know, but looking at the situation, I was not thinking that I wanted Charlotte at all. I was thinking that the line was going to be, like I said, closer to a pick'em, and it might be a spot to take Charlotte, but I don't think so. With that line being so high and the market indicators with the percentages being completely against Charlotte, I'm not going to do that. Toronto's coming off a couple of difficult games, man. They've faced maybe the most difficult schedule in the NBA so far. Cleveland, Philadelphia, Minnesota, and Denver, and their only win is against this Philadelphia team who I believe is still without Joel Embiid. So this Philadelphia team's not actually very good right now with massive injuries right now on that Philadelphia team. Other than that, Toronto's faced some really difficult opponents, Cleveland, Minnesota, Denver, and they played Minnesota and Denver pretty respectably and took Denver into overtime 2 days ago, so that's what they're coming off of, and now they have to go down to Charlotte. It doesn't look like a good spot for that reason to me on Toronto there. You play Denver, one of the best teams in the NBA, that tough, as a pretty big underdog. That doesn't look good to me, and they do have the Lakers up next, but if you're a 1-3 Toronto team, maybe you're not really overlooking anybody when you're a bad team like that. I don't know, but man, I mean, you could be pretty gassed after playing Denver that tough. Meanwhile, Charlotte, they have multiple extra days off here. They've been off since Saturday, so they have a lot more rest here, and that rest might help them break their losing momentum there as they've lost their last 2 games. So Charlotte is in the better rest spot too. So I really don't understand the percentages on this one. But again, like I said, I don't really understand the line being that heavy on Charlotte either, unless maybe the odds makers are factoring in the rest a bit as well. Probably they are. I mean, they kind of have to, but man, this is crazy. Charlotte's coming off kind of a big effort of their own against Miami, who's one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference still, I would say, with Butler still there. Although I'm going to talk about Miami and how I don't think that they're actually that great anymore in a second because I'm going against them today. Charlotte, that extra rest there. But yes, coming off a pretty good performance against Miami where they fell short, so that could put them in a bad spot too. But I think Toronto's in the worst spot, man. I mean, their rest situation is a lot worse. Charlotte has that extra rest. Is Charlotte going to be looking ahead to Boston? I don't know about that because when you have that much rest, I think you tend to want to come out focused, especially when that rest has broken up that loss streak for you and you haven't been playing that well. So I don't really think it's a spot where Charlotte's completely going to be looking ahead to Boston, especially because they want to win a winnable game like this, I would imagine. So that's how I look at that one. Let's just get to the plays, I guess, and then I'll talk about these college football games. New York Knicks, -1.5, although I think it's -2 in most places now. I mean, I still like it at -2 as well. Or you could maybe potentially find a Knicks money line. This line continues to go up, though, although I think the -2s are still pretty predominant out there. I was able to get it at the -1 overnight, or -1.5, excuse me, but not much of a difference, like I said, even though 2 is a kind of a key number in basketball because it's 1 2-point basket, but I like it either way. However you want to play the Knicks, that's how I recommend playing it. Just find some way to play the Knicks here. They're up from pick'em to 2, going through the 2, and heavy market indicators on the Knicks. 92% of the cash on them, but 92% of the tickets on the other side, on the Miami Heat side. So it looks like the public is thinking that there's value on the Heat side, because I think the public's going to look at this, say, wait a minute, this is Knicks Heat. These are both 2 good teams in the Eastern Conference. The Heat are at home. I'm getting the Heat at an underdog price, and the Heat have the better record, so why wouldn't I want to do that, right? I think that's the public sentiment here, and the public likes Jimmy Butler. I mean, he's the biggest name on either of these teams here. They like that the Heat can score a lot, but man, I'm telling you right now, the Knicks are the better team and they have the better defense. And I'm not even convinced that the Knicks don't have the better offense either here, really. Because I think Jalen Brunson just continues to be overlooked, man. Everybody loves Jimmy Butler. He's more of a flashy player. That's why I like Brunson, man, just because for whatever reason, he's just constantly overlooked, it seems. Maybe he's just not as flashy. The Knicks aren't really as much of an offensive-oriented team because they play good defense. But, man, I think the Knicks are just really being overlooked here. So for all those reasons, I do like the Knicks here. The market, like I said, strongly indicating on the Knicks here. The public, like I said, they're going to be looking at this and thinking there's value taking this Miami Heat team. Looking at the team's records, you got the Knicks at 1-2, Heat at 2-1, but look at who they've played, man. And we'll look at the scheduling aspect of this as well. But the Knicks, they've played one of the more difficult schedules in basketball, man. I mean, they lost on the road at the Boston Celtics, who are probably the best team in the NBA. So are you really going to fault them for that? Then they crushed Indiana, and Indiana is one of the best offenses in the NBA, even though I know they suck defensively. And that was a big revenge spot for the Knicks there. I missed out on that game. I probably should have played the Knicks in that one. I wasn't paying enough attention on Friday while I was in Florida there. Big win for the Knicks, but still Indiana, I mean, they're certainly not a pushover, even though I think they're maybe a little bit overrated. And then the Knicks lost to Cleveland, who I think is kind of flying under the radar a little bit. Cleveland, not a bad team either, and they're off to a 4-0 start, and we're in the playoffs last year. So this schedule has not been the easiest for the Knicks at all. Now they have a day off, and they get to start a road trip here, coming off a loss. I think that's a good spot, man. You get to start that road trip. You're coming off that loss. You want to just get out of town, man, after you don't have a great game at home, even though they played pretty close against Cleveland. The Knicks were still a favorite at home in that game, and they lost. So not the greatest, but, I mean, looking at this, it was a close game pretty much however you look at it. Close game statistically, so not really much to take away from that. I mean, it wasn't really like a misleading score or anything like that. I'm pretty sure the Knicks were favored, yeah. They're only favored by 2.5, so the odds makers, oddly, in that game, were actually saying the Knicks were basically pretty much only getting home court. Well, maybe a little bit more than home court. Home court doesn't give you that many points in the NBA. It's really only worth like 2. So the odds makers are still telling you the Knicks are the slightly better team over Cleveland. But now after that, not great performance. They get to go out on the road. They don't have a big game up next against Detroit. So there's no real reason to look ahead here. I think they're going to be focused on Miami here. So that's the way I'm looking at this. The Knicks, the odds makers are telling you they're the better team, man. If the Knicks are a favorite on the road, the odds makers are telling you the Knicks are like basically 5 or so points better than Miami is here. And I don't disagree with that. Miami, I mean, looking at the records, it's a little bit misleading, man, because the Knicks are 1-2, but both of their losses, all 3 of their games have been against really good teams. Meanwhile, Miami has only played one good team, Orlando. The Knicks are probably going to be the best team that they've faced so far. Miami got crushed in that opener by Orlando. So the one good team that they faced so far, they got absolutely annihilated. And then they won 2 games against Charlotte and Detroit. So they won against like the dregs of the NBA, really. And yes, they are staying at home here, but I mean, I just haven't seen anything that leads me to believe that Miami is the better of these 2 teams. I don't think that they are. Obviously, the Knicks have faced a much more difficult schedule here. So I'm going to take the Knicks in this one. I think they're in a more focused spot as well, whereas Miami is just kind of hanging around at home. Maybe you could say this was a close call against Detroit, and maybe that'll cause them to focus a little bit here on the Knicks. Even if that's the case, when you get both teams coming into the game focused, you tend to want to be on the better of the 2 teams, especially when it looks like they're being a little bit undervalued. So the New York Knicks are that play in that one. Tower Gang NPC, what's up, brother? The eggplant. Yeah, it is Cocktober, man. We're about to finish Cocktober. We already have announced the winner. Congratulations to Marshall Banana rather than eggplant. Hot dog rather than eggplant in his case. But we announced him as the winner. Go check out the Bohemian Grove episode, man, which is on Rumble right now. We should be getting it up on the other platforms as well. That was a fun time, man. And the other game I'm going to be on, this is one of my patented, ridiculously ugly plays in the NBA, where a lot of times I'll jump in and play NBA underdogs on teams that are just obviously not the better team, but it's just about the spot. That is the case here on the Portland Trail Blazers, and they were a difficult team for me to gauge last year. I know I played them in what I thought were spots to fade their opponents a lot of times last year, and a lot of times it did not work out for me. And I was getting angry. I was getting upset. But I think this is a spot to fade the LA Clippers and take the Portland Trailblazers, taking the big price here. Clippers are up from 7.5 to 8.5. They are public with 75% of the tickets, but 71% of the cash over on the other side on the Blazers. So I'm playing both of the biggest cash discrepancies that I see here on the board in the NBA. Both of these games look like big pros versus Joes disparities, although it might change a little bit throughout the course of the day. Hopefully not too much, but I think the Clippers are not in a good spot, man. I don't really trust the Clippers in general as a team. Like, we saw they had a lot of chemistry issues. They don't have Paul George anymore. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, when they made that playoff run, if you want to call it that, last year, I mean, they didn't look like they were really a team that had a lot of chemistry. James Harden, his teams tend to not have a lot of chemistry, so I don't know. I'm not a fan of this Clippers team, and yes, they have played a very difficult schedule so far. They're 2-1, and they've played really difficult games, and their only loss was at home in overtime to Phoenix. But hey, that means they're 0-1 at home, right? But I think this is a sandwich spot, man. At some point, I think they're going to have a spot where they overlook an opponent, and I think it could be right here. I mean, they started off the season losing a close battle to Phoenix, then they went on the road into high elevation, beat Denver. A big win there against the Western Conference or the NBA Finals champs from 2 years ago. One of the better teams in the NBA. Came out of that, came back out of elevation, back to the state of California, and beat the Golden State Warriors, who I know the Warriors are not that like dynasty Warriors team anymore, but still they're not a bad team, and beat them on the road on a back-to-back coming out of high elevation, having beaten Denver. That's crazy. That spot did not look like a particularly good spot for the Clippers at all, and they won anyway. Now they've had 2 days off. Yeah, that's true, but they are returning home now. Granted, they had already returned to the state of California, so it's not a whole lot of travel. They do have 2 days off. I understand that their rest spot is not that bad here, but still it is a road trip return, even though it was a small road trip, so probably not the worst, like, distracted road trip return spot here. I mean, I always say when you return home from a long road trip, you have to get back to home life. It tends to be a distraction. Probably not so much the case here, but this is more about the fact that this game is surrounded by bigger wins, man. I mean, you just played 3 tough games against Phoenix, Denver, and Golden State, and maybe that extra time off will actually hurt your momentum a little bit. But you just beat, like, some of the, like, top-tier NBA teams there. And now you have Portland coming into your place. Are you really going to be that focused on Portland when up next you have Phoenix again at home, basically a quick revenge spot there against Phoenix, who's one of the better teams in the West. It's KD still there, and Phoenix was the one team that beat you this season and beat you in your new arena. I think they're going to be looking ahead to Phoenix, man, and that game is tomorrow. So I think the Clippers could overlook Phoenix, man, or overlook Portland, man. They're looking ahead to Phoenix potentially, and they have Oklahoma City up after that. One of the best teams in the West in Oklahoma City as well. So this is like the down spot in their schedule, man. I think they could overlook the Blazers here. Blazers could surprise and play a more focused game and get within the number here. The Blazers, people might also look at the fact that, hey, wait a minute. The Blazers got absolutely crushed by Golden State at home by 36 points. And meanwhile, the Clippers went into Golden State and beat them. So how could you not lay the points with the Clippers here, right? Clippers won at Golden State, and then Golden State won at Portland by 1,000,000 points, basically. So you have to play the Clippers here, right? Nope. Hold your horses, man, because that's not the way that this stuff works. And yes, I do know this is a third game in 4. No, it's not a third game. Yes, it is a third game in 4 days for Portland, but they did have yesterday off. They're coming off a terrible performance against Sacramento. So I think this is kind of a bounce back spot for them. They're not going to want to go 0-2 on this road trip where they have to go down to California. They dropped the first game terribly. I think they're going to show up focused here for this one just because they want to try to split this road trip. When you're 1-3, you can't really be unfocused against anybody. So I like the spot for Portland better, even though the rest situation isn't exactly better for them. But that just means you're going to get maybe an extra point of value on them. So that's what I'm doing. I'm playing Portland in that spot there. I probably like the Knicks play a little bit better than the Portland one, but I'm on both. And then we'll talk about college football before I get out of here. We have these ridiculous Conference USA midweek games still going on here. I think this is the last week for those. We have one good game and one bad game, basically, in Conference USA. Jacksonville State and Liberty, the first game up, is the better game. Liberty's up from 1-2, going through the 2, so it looks like some significant live movement coming in on the Liberty side. Jacksonville State getting some public action with 71% of the tickets. 89% of the cash on Jacksonville State, though, so some weird conflicting indicators in the market here. And the total's down from 65.5 to 63. 83% of tickets and 98% of the cash on the over. I actually kind of like the over in this one, maybe even more than the side, even though the line is plummeted, or well, not plummeted, but dropped a bit there. I think this is a spot where even though Liberty has not been that impressive offensively, the line just moved a little bit back in the direction of Jacksonville State there. With 2 with juice on Liberty has gone back down to 2. This Jacksonville State team, they're all offense, man. I mean, they're really good offensively. They can definitely run the ball. They're kind of balanced offensively. They can throw the ball a bit as well. They did actually lose at home pretty badly to Liberty last year during Liberty's huge win streak, which I'll talk about in a minute. So if you put any stock into revenge, there is that aspect of it as well, where Jayville State lost pretty badly in their first FBS season at home to this Liberty team last year. So maybe they want a little bit of revenge here, but maybe not, because this Jacksonville State team, they're completely different than they were last year. A lot of new personnel on this Jacksonville State team here. But Jacksonville State, their defense is also very vulnerable, so they are all offense for the most part, and that is also why I think the public is coming in on the Jacksonville State side, because Jacksonville State is the better offense, so the public likes the offense. I mean, they're the offense that scored a lot more. Liberty is the team that plays better defensively, though. And Liberty, I mean, their offense is not really bad. So I think Jacksonville State's defense is vulnerable here. Their offense can put up some points. So an over in this game does kind of make sense to me. The total quite high, so the odds makers indicating that there probably are going to be some points being scored in this game. So that may be the way that I prefer to play this game over the side in this one. Of course, I'm not playing it. Jacksonville State, I mean, they are coming off a game where they're on a nice win streak here. After they lost 3 straight games to open the season, losing against a couple of good teams in Coastal Carolina and Louisville, and then a slip up in double overtime against Eastern Michigan. Maybe just because they were coming off that big game against Louisville, maybe they slipped up. I don't know. And since then, they've beaten everybody they've faced. They've beaten bad teams in their last 4 games. They've really shredded them all. And even though those are bad teams, I don't think that Jacksonville State's offense is bad, because they did put up good offensive numbers in these other games as well, except against Louisville. But Louisville plays decently defensively. So Jacksonville State, I mean, they've been putting up good offensive numbers. I think they're going to be focused on Liberty, because both teams should be focused here, because this is a battle between 2 of the top teams in Conference USA, man. So these teams are still trying to battle to get into the conference championship. They're both fighting to try to win the conference. Jacksonville State does have the momentum here, though, winning all these games in a row, granted, against bad teams, like I said. But they have the slight revenge motive, if you put any stock in that at all. And they have the momentum, because Liberty, we all know they lost as a giant favorite against Kennesaw State last week, who's probably the worst team in FBS. I mean, what was that? Liberty had the longest win streak in college football, and they lost the game. So when you have a long win streak like that, I mean, going all the way back to last year, and, well, I think we won't count the bowl, right? Because I think they got crushed in the bowl last year against Oregon, if I remember correctly, in the Fiesta Bowl or whatever. But I think if you just don't include that, I think they had the longest regular season win streak. But when you're not loose, you're not loose. Yeah, you're tight. Maybe they are playing too tight. When you're not used to losing and you lose a game like that, I mean, I could see it going both ways, man. I could see it's very embarrassing that you lost to Kennesaw State. You played a terrible game. So maybe you're going to bounce back from that and play a much more focused game. Or I could see it going the other way, where you lose that game and you're just not used to losing, and you lose that first game. Maybe it kind of has a lingering effect and it hangs you over into the next game. Although in this case, I think that may be less the case, though, because I think that tends to be more the case when you lose a game against a big opponent, whereas Liberty, they lost a game against a terrible opponent. And I think we can explain kind of maybe why this happened. I mean, look at Liberty's schedule here. They had basically played 1 game in like a month because they had this App State game that was canceled by the hurricane. They never rescheduled it, so they were off for a long period of time. They played one game against FIU that went into overtime. Didn't play that well there. I mean, I just think this Liberty team, I think their momentum was killed by having too much rest, man. I mean, what can you do? When you get the schedule in here where you have a canceled game, then you have a bye mixed in here too. So they only played this one game in a month span. So when you're off for that long, that's like too much rest, man. And it starts to turn into rust. And I think that's what happened. And I think they probably took Kennesaw State really lightly because Kennesaw State sucks so bad. And they were looking ahead to this game against Jacksonville State probably, who is one of their biggest competitors to win this conference here. So I think all of that was factored in as why they lost to Kennesaw State. Still no real excuse for losing the game outright. I mean, for playing a kind of an iffy game and not covering is one thing as a 25-point favorite, but still, I mean, you kind of expect them to still win by double digits in that game, even if they don't cover, and they lost the game outright, man. So it could be a bounce-back spot for Liberty in this one. It's hard to read this game, to be honest. So that's how I look at that game. And then that Kennesaw State team is also playing tonight at Western Kentucky, one of the best teams in the conference. Western Kentucky's up from 23.5 to 24. 52% of the tickets and 78% of the cash on the Kennesaw side right now. I'm not sure I buy that. I don't know if I buy Kennesaw State being public, even though everybody did see them pull off that huge upset last week. And maybe the public does look at this line and think, hey, this line is way too big. This Kennesaw State team upset Liberty, so they can hang with these other teams, right? Yeah, I'm not so sure about that because Western Kentucky, their offense is better than Liberty's, man. I mean, Liberty, they play good defense, but offensively, they've been a little bit challenged this year. Western Kentucky with Veltkamp at quarterback, this is a high-rolling offense, man. One of the best offenses in this conference for Western Kentucky, so it's a different animal here. This total is up from 48 to 49, 73% of tickets and only 71% of the cash on the over. I don't know how to read this total, although the odds makers are telling you that it should be a bit of a lower scoring game. A low total like this in a Western Kentucky game is weird because Western Kentucky, they can score, man. So this total is basically telling you Kennesaw State, their offense is so miserable that they might not score a whole lot in this game. I think that's what the odds makers are telling you. I mean, I don't know about that. Kennesaw has at least been running the ball a little bit better the last couple of weeks. Their passing attack is still awful. And they're in a huge letdown spot. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. When you pull off a monumental upset like that in your first season in FBS, you finally win that game and you do it against the team that has the biggest regular season win streak in college football. That's a huge win, man. So they could be in a letdown spot off of that, playing another team that's far superior to them. They could be in line to kind of have another setback here. Although you could also read it the other way, where you could say, well, wait a minute, they finally won a game, so now that, like, monkey is off their back, and they don't have that, like, looking over their shoulder anymore, the fact that we still haven't won a game yet. Now they have, so now they've tasted victory for once, and maybe that losing momentum is kind of broken by that win as well. So you could see that maybe going both ways a little bit, but obviously I still put more stock into a letdown spot when you pull off a 25-point upset like that. I think the letdown is the bigger factor coming into this one. Having to go out on the road to Western Kentucky, place they're not used to playing, obviously, because they're new to FBS, so it doesn't look like really a great spot there. Western Kentucky, I mean, are they gonna overlook Kennesaw State? I don't know, because Western Kentucky is actually coming out of a bye, but is that bye going to be helpful when they went into that bye on a nice note, winning 2 games in a row and winning pretty decisively? I don't know, man. You could argue that bye is going to help them prepare something for Kennesaw, but are they really going to spend that bye preparing for one of the worst teams in FBS? I don't know. Maybe last week once they saw, oh shit, Kennesaw State actually won, maybe that will draw Western Kentucky's focus a little bit, but I could see that bye maybe hurting their momentum as well because they went into that bye having won 2 games in a row, but the bye is, a little bit later in the season, so it maybe can help them rest up a little bit as well. So I could see that bye going either way. They don't have any huge games up next because their biggest opponents are these last 2 games against Liberty and Jacksonville State, so they have a few of the lesser teams in the conference coming up here, so they don't really have anything to look ahead to, so they may still show up and be focused on this game here against Kennesaw. So that's the way that I look at that, and I think that's going to do it, man. My plays, both in the NBA tonight. New York Knicks -1.5 and Portland Trailblazers +8.5. Knicks, I think you do have to lay 2 now, but like I said, I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I mean, I'm saying that you basically should because there's not a whole lot of a difference there. That's going to do it for me. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Go check out the Tower Gang podcast. Of course, check out the Bohemian Grove episode, which is only on Rumble for the time being. We should be back tonight, right? It is Wednesday, right? It's Tower Gang Wednesday, motherfuckers. So we should be tonight. I got to set up the streams and stuff. We should be back tonight to maybe discuss what went on in Florida and have a good episode there. The boys will be back. The boys are back. We're going to be back, baby. Go check us out. Subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/TowerGang. Give us some support. You get pre-show, post-show. You get the Telegram with us. Get to submit to the mailbag, and I think that's it. I'm Tower Gang Toad, baby. Let's have a good night. Let's get this NBA on track, man, because I don't like the start to the NBA. I don't like the last 2 nights of the slump here. Let's let the slump not continue. Let's break it. Let's bust the slump. Peace out. And thanks for hanging out, guys. Peace.